The Auditor-General provides assurance to Parliament on the accountability and performance of the Victorian public sector. The Auditor-General conducts financial audits and performance audits and reports on the results of these audits to Parliament. On 9th of March 2016, the Auditor-General tabled his performance audit report, Grants to Non-Government Schools. The audit examined whether grants to non-government schools are effectively and efficiently managed by the Department of Education and Training, or DET, system administrators and non-government schools. We found that there is limited assurance that grants are used for their intended purpose or are achieving intended outcomes. This is primarily due to weaknesses in funding agreements and DET's ineffective grants management, including limited oversight of grant recipients and their use of grants, and inadequate monitoring and reporting. There is a need to strengthen guidelines and funding agreements and the associated monitoring, oversight and accountability for the use of all grants to non-government schools. Non-government schools provide education to around 334,000, or 37% of all Victorian students. In 2014, the state provided over $640 million in grants to the non-government school sector. $624 million was provided as state recurrent grants, or SRG, which schools must use to meet the general recurrent costs of providing education programs, except for funding for students with disabilities. They also cannot use these grants for capital expenditure. And $16 million was provided in special purpose grants, which are used to assist students with particular needs. This slide shows the number of students in government, Catholic and independent schools as at February 2015. The independent school total includes ecumenical, Lutheran, Seventh-day Adventist and non-systemic independent schools. It also shows the amount of state recurrent grants paid to each system authority and non-systemic independent schools in 2014. Use of grants is governed by Memoranda of Understanding, funding agreements and guidelines. Grants are provided to system authorities and bodies for distribution to schools and direct to some non-government schools. DET is responsible for managing grants to non-government schools. The audit included an assessment of grants and their administration, the use of grants by the non-government school sector, and the achievement of intended outcomes. It included DET, system authorities covering Catholic, ecumenical, Lutheran and Seventh-day Adventist schools, Independent Schools Victoria and 22 non-government schools. The audit focused on the use of grants in 2014, which was the most recent complete school year that could be assessed. The audit identified significant weaknesses in funding agreements, including an absence of performance measures or related monitoring and reporting for SRG. Reporting that does occur is limited to financial information. Reporting for special purpose grants relates to high-level outputs, and there is no oversight of grant recipients by DET. Overall, DET's oversight and monitoring is limited and ineffective. DET allocates the SRG using its Financial Assistance Model, or FAM. The figure shows the makeup of the core and equity components used to allocate the SRG. The Catholic Education Commission of Victoria, or CECV, reallocates more than $400 million in SRG funds using its own methodology. While the guidelines recognise this may occur, some aspects of the agreement and the guidelines suggest an underlying assumption that each school will receive funding in accordance with its FAM allocation. The overall effect of the CECV's redistribution is that some Catholic schools receive substantially more than they would receive under DET's allocation and some substantially less, and the importance of student family background in providing SRG funds to individual schools is reduced. This slide shows the difference in DET's allocation made using its FAM per student compared to CECV's final allocation per student, with Catholic schools grouped according to Student Family Occupation, or SFO, index rating. Overall, the highest socioeconomic status schools, with an SFO index below 0.1, gained an additional 75.14% in student funding, while the lowest socioeconomic status schools, with an SFO index of greater than 0.4, lost between 11.35% and 63.33% of their funding. This is shown in Figure 3D of the report. All other non-government schools receive the SRG as allocated by DET, either through their relevant system authorities or directly from the department in the case of non-systemic independent schools. Overall, with regard to recurrent grants, there is a need for DET to clarify conditions and requirements around reallocation of recurrent grants by system authorities. Debt relies on system authorities to administer and oversee special purpose grants made to non-government schools. Debt's oversight is limited to ensuring that expenditure matches the payments provided. Debt does not oversee or monitor system authorities to assure itself that grants are used for their intended purpose or achieving the intended outcomes. Debt needs to improve oversight and reporting on the use of special purpose grants. We assessed a sample of 22 non-government schools' use of state government grants. Overall, they lack procedures and systems to ensure that grants are used for their intended purpose and were generally unable to provide evidence that grants had been used as allowed under the funding agreements. Debt needs to strengthen record keeping and reporting requirements and improve oversight and monitoring of use of grants. Debt has begun to address some of the identified issues. It has developed interim funding agreements, memoranda of understanding and guidelines for 2016, which strengthen performance outcome measures and reporting requirements. It is important that Debt continues to strengthen requirements and improve accountability as it develops arrangements for 2017 and beyond. We have made 5 recommendations to Debt. Recommendations relate to improving funding agreements, clarifying and strengthening record keeping and reporting requirements, and developing a program of audits of grant recipients and non-government schools, and clarifying any conditions and reporting requirements where system authorities reallocate state recurrent grants. The Acting Auditor-General has made a further audit comment in relation to a number of matters raised by CECV. CECV's response includes a series of assertions and inferences which comprehensively misrepresent the content of VAGO's report. The Executive Director of CECV also raises issues with regard to the integrity of the Auditor-General's office and the conduct of this audit, which suggests the evidence, the findings, the conclusions and recommendations were preordained. These assertions are supported by no evidence and we emphatically reject them. All Auditors General are bound by the Audit Act 1994 and the Australian Auditing and Assurance Standards, which require audit findings and conclusions to be based on sufficient and appropriate evidence. CECV's suggestion that VAGO's report will be of little use to schooling in Victoria has already been belied by Debt's agreement to implement our recommendations. These should provide significant improvements in accountability and transparency and give all Victorians confidence that government funds provided to non-government schools are used efficiently and effectively. These slides highlight the key messages from the audit. Overall, there is a need to improve funding arrangements and oversight to increase accountability for the use of grants by non-government schools. All our reports are available on our website. If you have any questions about this or other reports, or if you have anything else you would like to discuss with us, including ideas for future audit topics, please call us on 03 8601 7000 or contact us via our website.